Hi guys, welcome to part 2 of tuning a kind of second-hand hand plane. Get that correct. So in this kind of part we're going to go through flattening the underside and flattening the underside of your plane blade, wherever I put that, here it is. So flattening the underside of that. I've already flattened this, but I'll go through the kind of techniques essentially. Kind of what you'll need. So clearly if you haven't got some of this stuff, then you'll need to kind of purchase it beforehand. You need to have something flat to flatten the underside, and you need to have some kind of sharpening system. I will do a separate video, or if this is old then go and find it, I'll do a separate video on sharpening, oil stones, water stones, ceramic, all those kind of things. I'll go through that in a separate video or a tutorial. This one is just primarily going to be on what you kind of need to flatten the underneath of your plane and flatten the underneath of your blade as well to get it working essentially. So which I've discussed in kind of other videos, and obviously watch part 1 if you're interested in tips on buying a plane. This one clearly, like I said, is going to be flattening. So what you can buy is something like this. This is float glass stuck to a piece of kind of MDF. So we use this at the school like this essentially. I cleaned this up so you guys can kind of see it, but it's like, you know, this. We use the sharpening system that we've kind of adopted here at the school is using this abrasive paper, this micro finishing film, micro lapping film, micro finishing film. There's two kind of, it's lapping film for the finer ones and the micro finishing film. It's fantastic. The reason why, just a brief description, the reason why we like using it is because we buy it and it's kind of not always sold to you in these A4 kind of sizes, but for the most part, we kind of chop them up into 4 pieces and then we stick them to the glass. So for the students that when they're sharpening stuff, that they're not going to, if they are using kind of water stones you can kind of hollow out. Yeah, again, I'll discuss this a lot more detail when we come to sharpening, but you can hollow these out. That's not great when you're coming to flatten things, especially when you're a student, you're starting out, you haven't got much discipline on like getting these flat all the time, which lots of people don't, then that's not great news. Whereas for these, you cut them up and then you stick them to the glass essentially. So that's the sharpening system that we adopt at the school, just because it's a lot easier. For weekend classes and things like that, it's just an easy thing to do for us. So if you do want to flatten the underside of this or that, you need to have something flat. At the school, we have this thing here. This is a granite block. It weighs 80 kilos, so it's extremely, extremely heavy. That's why we've got it attached to a trolley. We have 3 of these, and these are engineering flat. I can't remember how much the cost is, but I'll do some research and I'll put a picture kind of up here so you can see it. So yeah, not for everyone, of course, because yeah, getting a shipping company to ship something that's 80 kilos, you know, yes, they're very, very useful. For the school, we use them all the time for people flattening, you know, whether it's a box that you've chopped in half. There's many, many, many scenarios where we use these granite blocks, use them a lot. And one of those being that you can flatten the underside of these, which I will go through in this video. Other than that, if you haven't, or clearly can't buy one of those, and it's also so heavy that your best option is either like a machine bed surface, yeah, if you have got one at home or your workshop or garage or what have you. If you have got one of those, then that's great. Then you can stick stuff down to it. If you haven't got that, the alternative is float glass. Don't buy toughened glass. Toughened glass and float glass. So float glass or plate glass can crack. You can kind of, if you just got a hammer and hit this, it would just kind of crack. It wouldn't shatter into a million pieces. If you smashed it on the floor, yes, but it wouldn't break into little cubes. Toughened glass is where it's gone through a process. Again, I'm not going to go into it, but it's gone through a process where it gets heated up, and that makes it toughened, which means it doesn't break as easily, but when it does break, it shatters into thousands of pieces, so you don't cut yourself. Whereas plate glass, like that's what they have on greenhouses and things like that, plate glass, and you can cut yourself very badly sometimes on plate glass, but that's what you want for these. This is what we use at the school. You want to have minimum of kind of 9 millimeters thick or thicker. It could be 12 or so on. Like, this is not big enough for flattening a big plane like this. You would probably get it slightly longer than this. Also, you get it wider that you can fit on, you know, like a whole sheet on here essentially. Then what you want to do is you want to get some, like you can kind of see here, you want to get some silicone sealant from your hardware store or something like that, and then kind of squeeze out. You can see we, you know, done this kind of pattern. What I would do is, let's get this out of the way, is get a piece of MDF, quite a thick piece of MDF. Do not use plywood, because plywood can kind of twist. Chipboard might be okay, but you need to check that it's flat beforehand. You don't want to glue this to this, and then this is twisted and flat and wonky, you know, not flat, it's wonky and all over the place. So get your float glass, put it on a bench that is flat, and you can check this, and I'll go through that in a minute, with a straight edge. Stick your glass down here, stick your silicone sealant, could be on the glass or could be on the MDF, and then kind of turn it over, and then place the MDF on here, and then I'd put on more boards of wood, yeah, and then put some weights on top of it. Yeah, try and distribute the weight on this. And because the silicone, it's obviously, it will take up any kind of imperfections. Yeah, you're going to, because the glass is pushing down onto something that is flat. Yeah, so you're going to put either books or just build up a stack of things. And that's enough. You don't need to clamp it. And then wait, you'll have to wait overnight for the silicone to go off. And then you're ready to go. And this could be and float glass is very cheap as well. It's kind of, for the most part, it may cost you 10, 15, 20 pounds or something like that. A granite block like that, it's going to cost you a hell of a lot more. But if you've got a machine bed or something like that, then it's, you know, then it's fine. Right, what you need to do as well, which I kind of checked this one, because this one was done a long time ago, that other tools that you will need, you don't have to need them, but if you're, not say passionate about furniture making, but if you want to make things flat, well, you need to have a decent straight edge. Yeah, this is a Starrett straight edge. A Starrett, was it 385? This is, I don't know, £100, so it's an expensive straight edge, but it will tell you whether your glass is flat. And you can see kind of here, it's got this kind of wobble, yeah? It's hard, there's a high spot kind of here. Also, other tools that are very important and not fairly inexpensive, feeler gauges. Feeler gauges are fantastic. They are thin strips of metal. Mechanics kind of use these a lot, but we use them in furniture making all the time as well to check gaps. So this one here is the smallest one that I've got. They're different thicknesses kind of this way. And this one measures 0.04 of a millimeter, or 0.04, 0.03, something like that. And then in inches, it is 0.0020. So that's how thin that thing is, that, you know, feeler gauge. And now, if I kind of, so you do this to check whether this is flat and other things are flat, and when you're planing bits of wood as well, sometimes. But if you look here, if I try and tuck this underneath, so you get this there, where it's flat, this does not go underneath, yeah? It doesn't go underneath here, but then if I check here, you can see, hopefully the camera, look, I've not lifted this up, that bit of metal is going underneath, yeah? If this was flat, as in this glass was flat, well, it would not happen. So this is not good. This would be fine for sharpening things on, yeah, because you're only sharpening a small area. I mean, it's not ideal, but it's okay. But if you were trying to flatten this on something like this, and it was like that, where you had this, it's a very, very tiny amount, but it's still a small amount. So clearly you've got to be very careful. Also, when you buy the float glass, there's not 100% guarantee that it's flat as well. Sometimes you have to buy a few of them, you know, so it's no guarantee, but it's a cheap alternative to buying something kind of like that. So that's not practical for everyone. So you need to check that whatever you're going to flatten this on, whether it's a machine bed, you've got a straight edge, and you can check it whether it's flat or not. We know that it's flat because it's sold as something that's engineering kind of perfect, so it is very, very flat. So that's something you need to kind of check. Right. what I could do is quickly check. It's going to be a bit hard to hold, but let me just check this as well. I did kind of, so this one, yeah, look, you can see it's got a bit of a wobble, same kind of thing. Straight edges will kind of pivot from the highest point. You can see I'm barely kind of moving this, and it's got a bit of a high spot there. And I bet you, I'll try and balance this with everything falling. Oh, just there we go. So it goes underneath there. Yeah, just tucks underneath. I don't want to knock it over. Same as before. Because it's pivoting from there, it's actually kind of closing itself down, kind of over there, because the pivot point's not in the middle. But you can see there is a problem. I know there's a problem with this, but that's the whole point of this video. It's how to sort this out. Right, so we know we need, you don't have to need one of these, but they're very useful. A feeler gauge. A straight edge is always a good investment. After that, you need to have some kind of abrasive paper. And I've said in other videos, I keep calling this sandpaper. I keep getting kind of, I just one of those kind of old-fashioned things, I guess. This is not sandpaper. This is an abrasive paper. This one's got an aluminium oxide, like grit that's kind of put on it. And this one is a Mercer, so Cariflex. So this is the kind of the common one that we use at the school, that you can use this for sanding kind of lacquers and things. I'm not going to go into it like a huge degree, but yeah, sorry if I get... if I keep saying sandpaper when I'm saying sand or something, you're not going to use sandpaper. You're going to use abrasive paper. So we have used this in the past. We have kind of, as in, you need to stick something to your granite block or your glass to then be able to sand it. And I've already done one bit on there, then I'll kind of show you how to stick the other one on there so you can kind of know what to do. Sometimes, because this is expensive, this is £4, let's say $5 a sheet. So you're sticking $10 worth of abrasive paper onto here. How long is it going to last? You know what I mean? All those things. That's expensive. If you're using, 10 of those, you're like, wow, the price is starting to go up. So in the past, we have stuck this abrasive paper to the granite block to sand your metal tools down. Whether it's, you don't use this for that, but you use this sometimes for underneath your planes. But I'm not going to use this because annoyingly, we use this stuff called spray mount. It's Q-Connect that they have changed their formula quite recently. So this was a very good, it's not a contact adhesive, but a spray adhesive. Contact adhesive is where you spray one half and spray on the other, and you stick the two together. You don't want to use anything that's too bulky, like a really thick kind of contact adhesive for sticking, because this is not sticky back. This is not a sticky back sandpaper. Sometimes you can buy sticky back sandpaper. We haven't got any, so sometimes you need to spray an adhesive onto here and then stick it to there. But annoyingly, they've changed the formula and this stuff's not very good anymore. So that's why I'm resorting to that. But sometimes, like I said, if you can find the right adhesive, sometimes photo mount is quite good, but photo mount is very expensive. It's like £15 a can, and they're normally half the size of this, so it's very, very expensive. So we're trying to find an alternative at the moment. So other things that you will need if you're doing stuff, if you're sticking stuff to glass or granite block, you'll need a kind of a roller. This is like a print roller, and again, I'll put a picture up here for the description and what it is. Like eBay, you can find these because you need to roll it down flat. You need to be able to peel. This one is, most of the ones that we buy, it's called PSA backed. So PSA backed just means it's sticky backed, but it's got a film attached to it, but you'll see kind of me doing that in a minute. So things that you'll need to, once you've stuck this and you've worn it out, you need to peel it off, but sometimes the adhesive gets left behind. Well, you'll need a solvent. You need to use, this is the container that we use, a white spirit. I wouldn't use acetone. Acetone kind of evaporates quite quickly. I'd use white spirit, which is more oily, which will break down the adhesive for this, essentially. So, and again, I'll show you this more in the sharpening kind of tutorial, but essentially, if there's loads of adhesive on this, you need to spray. So this is a kind of squeezy bottle. You squeeze it, and the white spirit comes out the top. Then you'll need a paint scraper to scrape the adhesive off to make it completely flat, and then you'll need to yeah, clean it off with a rag and put gloves on and kind of stuff like that. I'm not going to show you that because I've already kind of cleaned this one, but they're the things you'll need. And very useful anyway. Little bottles like this are always useful. Paint scraper, really cheap, and you have to have a roller to kind of squish it down. So that's what I'm going to show you now. I've already stuck that one down. I'm going to stick another one down as well. And I've got a different camera set up that will kind of zoom in a bit. So I'll come around here. So, I'm going to check this is perfectly flat. Well, not flat, I guess I know it's already flat, that it hasn't got any dust or debris on it. And I was very thorough. You want to be very, very thorough when you clean these. Right, so what you want to do, like I said, it's got the sticky, it's got a clear plastic film on the back of it, is to peel up a corner. Do not, so this is the tip, do not peel all of this off. You want to just start this. This one is an 80 micron. It doesn't go in grits, it goes in microns of grits, and it kind of works the opposite way round. Like the, say the opposite way around. Yeah, it's not the same. 80 microns is not the same as 80 grit. It doesn't work that way around, but there is a chart you can kind of see. Right, so this is where the roller comes in. So do not just peel all of this off and stick it down. You're going to get lots and lots of bubbles on it. So peel some of it back and then kind of locate this one right next to the other one, of course. You could have like the tiniest little gap. Let's get that corner. Yeah, because you can see, let's get that little bit. That's where I kind of picked it. I probably won't go anywhere near that anyway. So here's where the roller comes into its own. Do not roll it this way. You're going to use the corner of the roller. Yeah. So you're going to roll this nice and hard, and then slowly. Yeah, you can see I'm peeling this back. Yeah, don't go too far. So this means all of the air is then going to travel out this way. If you just whack it down, you're going to get bubbles all over the thing, and they're going to be trapped. There's going to be massive lumps all over it. Yeah, so push down nice and hard in the corners. I mean really hard. Yeah, and just keep going back with this. Yeah, and the same system for the sharpening, you know, for going onto the sharpening film or using that stuff. Same principle, but they're just smaller, so they're a lot easier to kind of stick down. I'll kind of discuss, like, if you have bubbles underneath, I'll kind of go through my tips on how to get rid of those. Right, there we go. Let's get that. Okay, just go around the edges. Make sure it's well and truly stuck down. Okay, so no bubbles underneath there. Pretty you know, you can see there's kind of a consistent, like teeny little ones, but they're fine. It's when you get like a big bubble here, you'll see that it's kind of lighter in colour, like maybe that corner, but I'll probably try and avoid that. That if you get bubbles in it, well, clearly you can't roll them out now. You need to kind of cut into the surface with a scalpel and then kind of roll it out. Yeah. If you have debris or something kind of underneath it, you need to kind of cut a little triangle out and pick that bit. You know what I mean? If you've left, like, I don't know, there's a bit of fluff or something kind of underneath it, you need to kind of cut a little kind of triangle out of it. You can't have a lump, of course, on this essentially. So I'll do the flattening of this in a second, but what I'll do now is I'll discuss kind of this one now as well. So what I use, so I have kind of same system. So instead of, you know, this is normally, so this setup is for students. So this is where we stick the, you know, the thin kind of slices on it. For my setup that I have, like, float glass still, but I have it kind of different grits stuck to different sizes, sorry, to different sides essentially. So I have a kind of a range of grits. I have, these are called anti-slip mats because it's got kind of that and that. So if I just put it onto this surface, it slides around. So I don't want that. Let's just get rid of my straight edge for a minute. That. Okay, so when I'm flattening the underside of my blade or chisel, first off, you need to use a Sharpie. So Sharpie, magic marker, like a permanent marker. So you need to kind of do this on the very tip of the blade, yeah? And then, there's a few different ways of doing it, but the whole point is, like, again, I'll go into this when it comes into sharpening, but where people will go wrong, and I know they've gone wrong, because I've gone wrong in the past, that you haven't flattened this is kind of hollowed out like so, and then you try and flatten the back of it, especially if you buy like a second-hand, plane or blade like this. When you try and flatten this like so, if this has got a big curve in it like that, well, it's going to curve, it's going to dome over this surface. You may think, oh, well, it's cleaned this up really nicely, but that wasn't flat. And then when you do go to re-flatten this, because you notice that it's not sharpening this correctly, you flatten this one now, and then you go back to flatten that again, and you find that it's not hitting your edge anymore because you have domed this over. So this is why some of these, if not used correctly, Waterstones that is, that you're going to damage these. So that's why I like sharpening with these. I don't tend to put any lubricant on these. I will use this kind of oil on those when I'm on this one, when I'm actually kind of sanding the underneath of that. Sanding, or making it flat. So what I did with this one, I'm not going to use the coarse paper. This is 30 microns, so you probably want to start on like something quite coarse, like a 30 micron, and then move on to a 15, and then there's a 9 micron, and then like a 5 micron or something like that to kind of give you more of a mirror kind of polish. So what I tend to do, so I'll get it kind of over as far as possible. What you don't want to do is start using this kind of really like here, and then accidentally start tipping stuff up. That's not what you want to do. You want to have it as far as possible, like that, and then push fingers here and fingers on the outside. Your fingers are on the outside to kind of grip it, essentially, and then do it in this kind of motion. Yeah. Sometimes, because you might have to remove a lot of material. If you're just doing this, where you're coming just up, like a back pass, yeah, I sometimes do that to take the burr off, but we'll go into that when we do kind of sharpening. But when you're trying to take off a lot of material, yeah, that you want to do this. Fingers on the middle, fingers on the outside, and quite a lot of pressure. And you'll see what the results, and then when you're taking it off, either you slide it off like that and tip it up, or you can kind of slide it off the side and kind of roll up. You don't want to kind of go and drag the edge onto there. It's just bad discipline. And then the more you do it, so if I kind of get close up here, you'll kind of see that this is fine. It's got rid of all of the Sharpie right at the edge. So I know this is flat, and I've already done this before. Essentially, it's the same. All you're going to do is you're going to do that, have a look at me like, no, I need to do on the coarse, not the coarsest grit, but 30 microns or 50 perhaps, or a 40, that you'll do it on there, look at it, be like, oh, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And then you move on to the finer microns. You need to move on to the 15, and it will take less time, of course, because this has done all the grunt work, and then now you're just kind of polishing it up. And then you'll just, if you're like me anyway, you'll flip this over and you'll go to the 9 micron and then the 5 micron. And then that's kind of it. You shouldn't, because this is stuck to glass. This isn't going out of flat. When these get worn out, you peel them off, you clean it up with a white spirit, you scrape it, you stick another one on there, and so on and so forth. So there should be no reason for this blade to go out of flat anymore. If you adopt the kind of, I'm not saying I don't like Waterstones, I like Waterstones, but I don't like that they hollow out. And yes, you've got to be disciplined, you've got to flatten them all the time. students and things, of course they don't flatten them all the time. Sometimes they're inherently lazy, so they don't do that. They have bad discipline. But if you stick with this system, over a lifetime, these will kind of cost you more money than this, but it's not like it's thousands of pounds, you know what I mean? It's kind of one of those things that, yes, they do cost a bit, but once you flatten this, well, you're just into sharpening then. You've done the hard work, and once it's flat, like I said, it's flat. Right, now we'll move on to this one. Right, so this is going to be the tougher one, and I'm not going to kind of, like, I might do a bit of a time lapse, but what I'll try and do is, obviously, I'll record like the beginning of it and like tips and tricks, and I'm not going to record all of it because I might have to do it in like, I can't do it in one session because I'm a teacher at the school and this is a school day, so I'm just kind of shooting this in between kind of lessons. So if this takes me kind of an hour or two, well, I'll make notes of how long it takes me essentially, but I'll do the kind of initial bit so you guys can see, and I'll discuss through it, and then I'll kind of talk to you guys at the end and how long, and I'll tell you kind of how long it's taken, and I'll kind of, do that in the next shoot, I guess. So what you need to do, again, same thing, you need to put marker on it. You need to mark this up, especially around, this is the kind of, around here, kind of the business area, the mouth. So this is that's the back of the plane, that's the front of the plane. That's the most important part that needs to be flat here. You could have a little bit missing kind of here, you could have a little bit missing kind of here. It's not the end of the world, as in it's not completely flat there. That's what I mean by missing, as in like it's not taking it. But you'll see as I kind of start sanding it, you will see. So you don't have to have the blade in and attached for the jack planes, but I would recommend having, for low angle planes, you have to have the blade in, retracted, so clearly the blade's not sticking out, and you need to have that kind of, the blade tightened to the correct amount of tension, as in like how tight, and it's not got to leave a cap, but you get the idea. It's like how tight the blade is, it needs to be set up how you would be using it to kind of flatten it. So that's the difference between kind of jack planes, smoothing planes, and low angle planes. You need to have the blade in and set up, so you don't need it in this one. Okay, so let's have a look. I'll use some oil in a minute because the oil does get kind of stuck to it, but I'll just do a couple of passes. So the thing to kind of remember about this abrasive, this one is 80 microns, so it's a very coarse one, it's a very coarse grit. So what you've got to try and remember is that I try and describe this as, this has got 80 micron grit stuck to it with an adhesive. So you've got to think that you can't just keep going in the middle, you have to kind of wear down this adhesive like fairly consistently, because if you start kind of, and I would hold the plane as you would be planing something, so medium amount of pressure, not like a huge amount of pressure. You've got to be very careful not to tip this thing. That's one of the things to kind of really watch out for, is not to kind of tip it. So when you're kind of doing it, is just to kind of do this and medium pressure and try and go over all of the abrasive paper. And try and go all the way over the other side. Doesn't matter that I'm going off the end like a tiny bit, because it's not, you know what I mean, it's wide enough kind of here. I wouldn't necessarily, but you want to wear this all down. How I like to describe the grit, if you were to kind of zoom into this with a kind of a microscope, you would see sharp spikes essentially, because the abrasive is high up. But if you were to just use the middle, and then slowly go over here and slowly go over there and go, oh, well, I'll wear out this bit in the middle first, and then I'll creep over here. You've worn out the abrasive here, and it becomes rougher at the sides. So you could, and I describe it as like grass. So you've almost mowed the grass kind of here, and it's got really rough grass here. And if you're going from here to a little bit over there and a little bit over there, well, that's how you can kind of dome this thing over. And that's one of the things you really don't want to do. You don't want to kind of dome this thing over. You can see kind of what I knew, like, because a straight edge kind of told me, you can see that it's kind of hit this area kind of here, and it's hit that area here, and a little bit at the end, but it's kind of hollow here, and it's not doing that there. So I'll just do a few more passes. Again, pressure down, medium kind of pressure. And I'll put some oil on to see kind of how that feels as well. Sometimes I do put lubricant when I am flattening the underside of planes. Yeah, and this could take quite a long time, but I'm going to put some, I mean, this is just sharpening, Norton's sharpening stone, so it's for like, you use this on oil stones and things. Probably need a little bit. And what I found is it really pulls the, it really pulls the plane down when you're using this stuff. Yeah. Again, I'm kind of moving it around, so I'm wearing it all down at the same time. You might find that you know, what happens to like any abrasive, you wear it down, it's really coarse to start with, and then it gets kind of, it knocks it off, and it wears it down, and it wears it down, and wears it down. And then eventually, at the beginning, you'll see it, because now it's all kind of, you know, it's all grubby with oil. That's why I didn't do it straight away. That when you use it to start with, what was I going to say? Forgotten my train of thought then. Yeah, so when you're kind of, that's it. When you are using it, how do you know when to change it? Well, you'll know when to change it, that it's taking a long time, and it will start polishing this essentially. So you'll need to kind of clean this up, and then once this becomes, you know, it's kind of slowing down a lot. So I would say I'll kind of let you know, once I kind of finished, I'll let you know if this did the whole thing or whether I had to replace it. So I'll let you know at the end, but it'll be really quick to start with, and then it will slow down, and it will start polishing it. So that's kind of, so you don't necessarily need to kind of 80 grit, 30 grit, 15, you don't need to go through that, because this will wear down itself, and then it will start polishing it. So that's why you could start with 80, or you could start with something else, because it will wear down. But you have to kind of, I call it washing it out. You have to go to all of the different areas. Yeah, you have to flatten this thing out. Yeah, and then eventually you're going to kind of clean this off, and if the Sharpie starts disappearing, you're going to have to re-sharp it in different areas. Well, that's where I'll come in. Obviously, you guys won't notice any difference, because I'll just kind of continue afterwards, but that's where I'll leave this one, or anyway, this section anyway, and you'll see me in a minute anyway, and see the results. Right, so conclusion. How long did it take me? Because clearly for you guys that took a matter of seconds, but for me it took, well, I mean, instead of doing it yesterday, I think it probably took in total, like, I don't know, an hour and a half, something like that, maybe 2 hours. But I did that in many different like time periods. I'd do it for kind of, you know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then do something else, so on and so forth. But I had it on approximately kind of an hour and a half, 2 hours, kind of something like that. It's got a bit of oil on there. It's not absolutely perfect. I could have spent, and I'll kind of discuss why, and it will still be okay, and we'll see the kind of results, because I'm going to start using it. The reason why it doesn't need to be like exactly perfect, and it would take, so me taking kind of 2 hours or near that, what have you, that if I wanted this to be there's a tiny bit kind of missing from the end, and I'll kind of demonstrate what I mean by that, like just here. That's kind of fine. If I wanted to get this absolutely perfect, it made me take another, because it's a little bit low here. Yeah, because I can fit the feeler gauge in there on that. And that means I've got to remove all of this material to get rid of that. And then removing that with the, you know, with the abrasive paper would take forever, would take days and days and days, and you get so tired. You wouldn't be able to do it essentially, because your arm would be, you get, you know, tired after a while, essentially. Your arm gets sore because you're doing it for so long. So how many grits did it take? I used 80 microns to start with, and then I changed it over to 100 microns. 100 microns is coarser than 80 microns. Like I was discussing in one of my other videos, it goes the other way. It's kind of the higher the grit, the coarser it is. Whereas in normal abrasive paper, like 1,000 grit is very fine. And this is 100 microns, that's coarse, and then it goes down. The lower the number of microns, the finer it is, essentially. That's how it works with the finishing film. So other things I've done, so I did this all by hand. I did it by hand on the granite block, and that's the way I got it flat. When I wanted to do other things I've done, I have flattened the sides of it here. I'll kind of show you in the kind of camera kind of there, and I've flattened that side as well. It's got a bit of, no, it's got some pitting. It's got some pit marks on it. It's got some pitting here. Pitting is where it has kind of rusted and it's dug, it's kind of, oh, what's it called? Well, it's a weird way of describing it. I guess the rust eats into the metal itself. So it's not just surface. It buries itself into there. It eats into the material further and further. And thereby it leaves what they're called pit marks kind of here. So I would have had to have kind of ground off a huge amount of material here to get rid of those. And once I kind of flattened this a bit, and then I went on the sanding paper or the abrasive paper and then sanded the side of the plane. It's not essential to do this, but I wanted to kind of clean it up. And that showed me that it wasn't very flat. Yeah, and I'll show you some pictures and stuff now. It wasn't very flat along here, and it wasn't very flat along the other side. So, yeah, I spent, near 2 hours getting this flat, and then if I wanted to get that flat and that flat, I could have been doing it for 3 days. And this isn't very important, being very flat, not unless you use your plane on its side. So if that doesn't need to be flat, why am I going to waste my time getting this flat? But just for the purpose of the video, what I did is we have a machine downstairs called a surface grinder. And I didn't want to spend hours, but I knew a surface grinder, again, I'll show you some images now, that a surface grinder has a magnetic bed on it, essentially. And you turn the magnet on, and then if the thing you are grinding is magnetic, this is cast steel, then it sticks to it. So I stuck it down to the machine and I ground this off because this is parallel to that, which should be very close, and it was. So I ground off, I don't know, let's say, I didn't measure it, but let's say 0.1, 0.2 of a millimeter off of the whole thing. And the machine the bed kind of slides side to side, and you can machine this off. And then I just flipped it over and did the same on the other side because it sticks with the magnet. Clearly not everyone has one of those machines, but when I did that downstairs, it probably took me 45 minutes to do this side and the other side. And because that is an engineering machine, that this is engineering flat now, and it is parallel to the other side. Not that it needs to be parallel necessarily, but that's what happens when you have got a machine like that. It doesn't take much time. But you could say, well, why don't you just surface grind this as well? Well, you can see the problem. How am I supposed to hold this in the machine? It relies on a magnetic force to pull this down, which it did with this one, so it doesn't move. This is not parallel to anything on the underside. So it is extremely hard to try and set this up on a surface grinding machine. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it is very, very hard because you trying to kind of clamp this or hold this in any way, it can move or warp or twist. So it's extremely hard to try and set this up on a machine. Like I said, I'm not saying it's impossible. You might be able to give this to an engineering firm for them to kind of flatten this completely, but that could cost a lot of money. So that's why I did this bit by hand to show that you can do it. It takes time, of course, but it can be done. I just did the sides here and here because we had the machine and it was very easy to do. So again, you don't have to kind of do those to plane a piece of wood. You clearly don't need these to be perfectly flat. So what I'll show you now, and you can kind of see from, I'll show you this other camera, that is nice and, it's nice and clean. I didn't go any finer with the microns here. I stuck with the 100 and the 80. It doesn't leave kind of massive scratches in the thing. It once this kind of wears down a tiny bit, like I said before, that it's 100 microns to start with, and it gets worn down and down and down, and it doesn't scratch as much because the high spots have kind of come off a little bit. So, yeah, I'll show you in some of the images here. It's not got big scratches or anything like that. Then, I checked it, of course, because I kept on checking it as I was going, making sure that this wasn't kind of domed over. Yeah, if it's domed over, well, then you'll get a bigger shaving here and you'll get a bigger shaving here. But we'll go through that once we go to the setting up kind of stage. What you can check is, again, it's very kind of useful having a granite block. You could try and do this on the machine bed, but you can't beat a precision granite block. Glass, you know, perhaps, but that's not sold as an engineering flat thing. This is sold as something that's engineering kind of flat. So make sure there's no dust or kind of bits and pieces on here. Lay that down. Make sure the air kind of comes out of it, because sometimes they kind of float around a tiny bit. Now, talked about these before. God, I forget the name now. Feeler gauges. These are feeler gauges. Mechanics kind of use these. I was trying to, I kind of Googled kind of last night about, or did some research on trying to find one of these that is thinner, but they're quite expensive. So this goes, most feeler gauges, the common kind of size that it goes down to, the thinnest size, is 0.04 of a millimetre. I don't know what that is in inches. I did discuss it the other day, but that's kind of as small as this one goes. You can buy smaller ones. You can buy ones that are 0.02. When it comes to 0.01, it is so delicate that they do not sell it kind of like this. It comes as kind of tape, essentially. But that was £50, and I wasn't just going to buy it just for the purpose of this, because this works. And trying to get an understanding of how small 0.04 of a millimetre is, like human hair, like varies from, if you have very thin hair, that ranges from 0.04 up to 0.08 or thereabouts if you have quite thick hair, maybe slightly thicker. So that gives you an understanding of how thin this piece of metal is. And when I try and, so if you're trying to check whether something's flat, well, then you can check your feeler gauge and try and kind of look, and you see it doesn't go under here. Yeah, it doesn't poke under there. Go all the way to the back. Yeah, it doesn't go under there. Goes a little bit under that back bit. You can work all the way around, but where it does go under is at the front. Yeah, you can see that kind of tucks in. That goes in, let's say 15 millimeters, half an inch, something like that. It goes underneath that front lip. Yeah, by that amount. Goes in by, you know, that distance. And then I go, right, well, how big is that gap? Well, I'm going to go up. That's 0.06. So I'm going up in thickness. That still goes under 0.08 of a millimetre. That goes less in. That only goes in, I don't know, 3 millimetres. And then if I go a bit thicker, now this is 0.15 of a millimetre. And that one barely goes under. So what I was trying to say is, if you wanted this to be absolutely perfect, you'd have to remove 0.15 of a millimetre from everywhere else apart from that, front bit, of course. And that would probably take you 5 hours if you're doing it by hand, and you'd have to use, 10 of those perhaps, and it would take you forever. So is it the end of the world that it hasn't quite kind of done that front bit here? The answer is no, it's not the end of the world. I'm not going to spend 5 hours and loads of it, spend or more than that, days and days and days, trying to sort all of this out. Like I said in some of the other videos, that the business area of this is the mouth, right where this kind of mouth is here, and like around, this general kind of area around here is so important. If you had a big hollow spot here, of any gap whatsoever, it won't work. But you can have a tiny bit here. Yeah, it's not ideal, but it's not going to be the end of the world. So they're the things you can kind of accept. You can accept like a tiny bit here, and I think I had the tiniest low spot here, but you're talking, it was like, I don't have a feeler gauge small enough. It wouldn't fit underneath there. So the gap between, like here, there was a bit of a low spot there. You're talking 0.00 something or other. It's absolutely minute, and what difference is that going to make whatsoever, kind of right back here? So I've got a tiny bit here, and then a minute bit kind of here. And obviously, if this thing was domed over, then I would be able to fit, if I put that down, I would be able to fit a feeler gauge kind of underneath it. So I don't know 100% because I'd need to get a smaller feeler gauge to kind of see where that fits underneath. But I'm pretty happy with that. That now I've kind of cleaned up the edges, I've cleaned up there. The next stage in this kind of series is going to be the blade. It's going to be, we've flattened the back of it now, I've discussed that. The next bit is going to be using the grinder, so going through that as a kind of lesson. So grinders, wet grinders, bench grinder, so like this guy here, and talking like that one there. Clearly if you have some experience, well, you can skip those ones, but this is supposed to be for students as well to be using things like this, not necessarily kind of, you know, tuning up old planes, but, you know, again, this is supposed to be useful for people in the future, you know what I mean? Like, oh, I want to tune up a plane. Oh, I remember Theo did that. The same with the Tormek kind of thing, going through, like setting it up, how to use it, redressing the stone, or bench grinders. It's supposed to be kind of something that you guys rely on in the future. Be like, oh yeah, I remember Theo doing a video on that kind of thing. I'm hoping so anyway. That's my kind of, you know, ambition, I guess, that people kind of look back on these, because you're not going to watch every single one because you may not need it at that time. You may need it in the future. So that's the next kind of series, because I want to go through the progression. There's no point me just sharpening this up and start using it. Well, you haven't gone through the grinding. You need to go through all of those stages, essentially. So that's the next one, grinding, sharpening, and then it's setting it up. And then I'm going to do a project. It's going to be a breadboard. So that's my kind of goal, will be that it's just going to be a lump of wood. I don't know whether I'm going to hand plane all of it. Depends on what it looks like, but I'll see. Whether it's just, you know, it's a bit of an exercise for you guys at home, because obviously we have a planer, we have a thicknesser machine here that I could easily do that, and I could get the breadboard, and we have a thickness sander machine here. But it's not about that. It's about understanding hand planing and thicknessing and all of those bits in between, and a bit of timber technology as well. So I hope that's been kind of helpful. Hopefully stick with this series. Yeah, thumbs up if you like it. Please write a comment. It always helps. I do try and read as many as I can. Subscribe and these kind of things. Please share with your friends. If you've got kind of woodworking friends and kind of stuff like that, please share the videos. They're free. But anyway, yeah, thanks for watching.